You've been trying so hard to stop binge eating, but somehow it feels like your urges are actually getting more intense, not less. You might start to wonder, is something going wrong? Or if you're really capable of overcoming disordered eating habits. The truth is, nothing is wrong with you. And in fact, what you're experiencing is actually a sign that something is working. So today I'm going to explain why your urges get stronger before they get weaker. And I'm going to start by sharing a personal story that I know a lot of you can relate to. One of the few things that I've been processing over the last few weeks is a breakup. And we decided to do no contact. And after exactly 1 week from the point that we last talked, I was hit with this feeling that I would literally die if I did not pick up my phone and give him a call right then and there. And it was really uncomfortable. My thoughts were consumed by him and just feeling this really deep need to hear his voice. And I didn't even know if I was going to make it through the weekend. All I wanted so badly throughout that weekend and most of the moments was thinking about just wanting to talk to him. But what stood out to me is that experience felt exactly like how my urges to binge used to feel, especially around the weekend. I would go through and I would just think about wanting to eat so badly, feeling like I might actually die if I didn't eat that food right then and there. My mind would become flooded with the idea of eating, and I would feel so frustrated and really distressed. But what's interesting is then something changed. As the minutes passed on and the days went on, my cravings started to lessen, because the truth is all cravings will go away eventually if you give them the time and space to. So after that one weekend, I still think about my ex occasionally, but the desire to call him went way down because I didn't act on that urge. So my brain started to wire itself to not give me that desire anymore. I want you to think about a bell curve, the shape of it. When you first decide I'm not going to binge anymore, you might not feel that much resistance, and it kind of feels easy. You might make progress for a couple days. You might start to feel this sense of freedom and lightness and peace. But then the reality sets into your brain that we're not binge eating anymore, or we're not talking to this person anymore, and your brain realizes, uh-oh, we're about to eliminate this habit. It wants to make sure that you are okay with eliminating that habit. So it sends out this big final urge as a test to see, do you actually want to get rid of this pattern? Or do you want to binge? Do you want to act on this habit one more time? And if you can pass that test at the top and get through those final strong urges at the peak, then the curve goes down. This is as your brain starts to prune away that habit and extinguish it. Now, there are ways and strategies and mindsets that you can use to make sitting with the urge at the top easier and less painful than what you're dealing with right now. And that is something I can teach you. I have a whole guided audio on this topic of how to sit with a binge urge, and that's something you can find in the show notes. But you first need to understand the reason of why these urges feel so hard to deal with right now. This is the psychology of what's happening in your brain that I wish I was told years ago. When you repeat a behavior enough times, your brain builds a neural pathway for it. The pathway doesn't just disappear just because you decide you don't want to binge anymore. It fights back. And the way it fights back is by sending a stronger, more urgent signal to keep the behavior alive. Think of this like a toddler having a tantrum when you take away a toy. The screaming gets louder right before they give up and accept it's gone. The urge intensifying is that tantrum. It means that your habit is about to lose its grip. Think about how many times you've acted on that urge to binge before. All of those years, all of those occasions that you binge have been reinforcing this pathway in your brain. So your brain says, okay, every time the urge appears, I have a binge. And then the discomfort of that urge goes away. It has learned this sequence deeply. So when you start interrupting that sequence, the brain doesn't understand why the usual solution isn't getting deployed. So it sends out a bigger signal, essentially turning up the volume to try to get your attention. And if you're able to hold through that peak without acting on it, the brain gets no reinforcement. And this is a good thing, because then over time, it learns that this isn't a habit you want anymore. So it will start to prune away that pathway because it's no longer useful. So every time you ride out an urge to binge without acting on it, this peak gets a little bit lower and less intense. The time between your urges gets longer. You might notice days or weeks before you get an urge to binge again. And eventually the urge barely registers. It's just something you you don't really think about anymore. So the intensification of wanting to binge is literally the mechanism of change happening in real time. It only feels like you're failing or something is going wrong because no one has told you that this is supposed to happen. Now, I also wanted to share this story of going through a breakup with you too, so you could see how important it is to have the skill of sitting through urges, because this truly is a life skill. The ability to sit through discomfort is not just something you need to stop binge eating. This is something you need to have a happy, healthy life of your dreams forever. I am so grateful that I went through my struggle with food because that has allowed me to have a greater capacity for discomfort in my life. I now know when I get that strong craving to do an old habit of any sort, whether that's around food or around texting a person or impulse buying something on Amazon. That's something I was working with a client on this week. I know that that is a discomfort that I can sit with and that it's not a big problem. I know that I won't actually die from that discomfort because I've shown myself in so many times around food where I thought I was going to die if I didn't act on that urge that I didn't. I made it through and I can handle discomfort. And that's a belief that builds over time. So here's exactly what you are going to do instead the next time you get a strong urge to binge. The first thing that I mentioned is using my guided audio to stop a binge. If you have not gotten this already, thousands of people just like you have downloaded this audio that will help you with psychology get through an urge without binge eating. And I created this audio not just randomly, but because this is really the exact tool I desperately needed to calm myself down during an urge. So it's really nice to have something actionable that you can put in your ears and listen to in those moments. The second thing I want you to do is look at what would happen if you actually acted on the urge. Play the story forward and ask yourself the question, and then what? So for me here, that question was, all right, let's say I give into this urge. I do give the ex a ring. He picks up, we have a good conversation. I feel that relief in the moment. And then what? Well, then we would still be over with. Then I would go back to square one of having to process this whole thing over. I would undo all of the work I just did to rewire my nervous system. And that's not to say that I would go completely back to square one because we are always learning and growing throughout our journey. I know sometimes we can get into this mindset with binge eating too, that if I binge, I'm back to the beginning. I truly believe that we are never back to the full beginning. We are learning, and those learning moments count no matter what. But if I called him, I would essentially be resetting my nervous system to be wired into him, which is in some ways bringing me backwards. And so what I told myself is I've already done so much amazing, great hard work to process this. I don't want to have to go through this all again. You can think the same thing around food too. You've been doing so much hard work to not binge. You've been learning so much. You've gotten a couple days under your belt where you haven't binged. You don't want to go back to that point that you just were at a couple days ago. You want to keep your progress moving forward and to have the momentum continue. One of the things that also stopped me from reinforcing this habit of calling my ex and having that conversation with him was I had a friend who was coming in town on Friday night and I was going to go pick her up from the airport, and I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot have my bestie who just flew across states come into my car and have to confess to her that I just called him. I do not want to have to tell her that. I want to be able to say that I have been staying strong and I feel really proud of myself for that, even though I'm going through something really hard. And part of me wanted to justify that this isn't the only hard thing I have going on in my life right now. I can't deal with all of this stress, all of this discomfort at once. Maybe you've had that thought too. I can't handle this urge with all that's going on in my life right now. It's too much discomfort to handle. And I start to justify, maybe it's okay to just remove that piece of discomfort temporarily by acting on this old habit. But again, that's not the type of person I wanted to be. I wanted to be the person who, even though I do have a large tolerance for discomfort now, I want to expand that tolerance even more. I wanted to be able to say, I can go through the hardest thing and come out of it and say, I did it. I made it through and I showed up as the type of person I wanted to be. I gave myself rest. I gave myself lots of compassion. I reached out for support. And that's what helped me get through it. Not calling the person, not going to food. This is also what makes my clients so successful when they work with me, because they finally have someone holding them accountable. You start to think, well, I don't want to binge this week because I'm going to have to tell Amber that I binge. I'm going to have to go to our coaching call and get coached on it and go through that discomfort all over again. And of course, I'm never here to judge you. I love coaching on this, and we have coaching calls to support you in these moments where you might give in because you want to have learning moments, and I help you identify those learning moments and move forward. Anytime we're learning something new, we're going to have slip-ups. But I will say that when you have someone in your corner to actually talk to every week about your binge eating and your goal to become a normal eater, it gives you such a deeper layer of motivation because you want to feel proud of yourself and you want to be able to celebrate with another person. You want to be able to show up to our coaching calls and say, Amber, oh my gosh, I just had the best week ever. And I'm there celebrating with you, telling you how amazing things have gone and pointing out all the shifts you started to make, reinforcing that change in your brain on a deeper level. It's really fun to have that person to do that with. Finally, the last thing I want you to remind yourself of is that you are not going to die when you have an urge to binge. Now, I know we know this logically. Of course, we're not going to die if we don't eat that food, but it can feel like that. So even just creating safety in our brain of telling yourself the truth of what's happening can be useful. Saying things like, I'm feeling thoughts that are creating desire for this thing in my body, and that is uncomfortable because I don't truly want to desire this thing. We don't really want to desire the food, but we're telling ourselves stories like, this is so good. I'm never going to get it again. I need this food pleasure. It's so delicious. And so we want to go get the food. But that's not the reality of what happens. The reality of what happens when we act on these old habits that we know aren't in alignment with our true highest self is we always feel worse after. We betray our own goals, and that leaves us feeling insecure when we want to feel confident. The way we feel more confident about ourselves is by keeping our promises, by making the hard choices and taking action for the things that we know might be hard today, but will make our life easier next week and the week after that and next year and for the rest of our life. It's a very normal thing to feel uncomfortable when you're changing. That doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. In fact, it means you're on the right path. The way you can tell if this is a positive discomfort or a negative discomfort is by asking yourself the question that we talked about earlier, and then what? If I sit with this discomfort and I get through this urge to binge, and then what? Oh, well then tomorrow is going to be so much easier for me, and I'm going to be so proud of myself because I've now unwired this habit just a little bit more. So that's clearly productive discomfort. Now let's use another example. Let's say you're like really hungry and you're telling yourself, I just don't want to eat because I want to keep losing weight. That is not productive discomfort, because if we ask ourselves, and then what? Then what happens is I usually binge and I eat 3 times the amount of food I would have ever eaten had I just had normal meals throughout the day. And then what? I'm also reinforcing the habit of restricting and binge eating, and that's not the habit I want to enforce. So you can see that there's this clear line between positive and negative discomfort, and you need to look to the future to see which one it is. But when you're sitting with that positive discomfort, what's going to happen is your brain is going to start to change itself so you can be the new you that you really want to be. And you'll be this new you permanently because we're doing the insider work to change ourselves. We're not just putting a band-aid solution on it. The urge to binge will always be the strongest right before the habit is extinguished. So if you're going through this week, you're getting those really strong urges, I want you to say, woohoo! Thank you, universe. Thank you, brain, because this means I'm about to get a really big breakthrough and everything on the other side of this will be easier.